Prince Warriors Volume 3 by Priscilla Shirer, Chapter 24, Lost and Found. Xavier and Evan, wearing their armor, had seen most of the sword fight. Once Victor disappeared through the portal, they rushed toward Levi and his dad, who were doubled over with their hands on their knees, trying to catch their breath. "Man, that was epic," Evan exclaimed. "You totally kicked his..." "Evan," said Xavier. He turned to Levi. "Levi, I'm sorry. You were right about Victor. I never thought..." "It's okay," Levi said. "I'm just glad we got here in time." "Ponyroast must have tricked Victor into working for him," said Evan, "just like he did with Rook. Then sent him here to mess with us." "Yeah, I guess so." Levi realized that his sword had shrunk back to the kris. It was like it instinctively knew the danger had passed and it was no longer needed. His fathers had done the same thing. Was this another of the kris's secrets? He wanted to ask his dad, but now was not the time. They had a bigger problem to deal with. "We need to find Brianna and Ivy," he said. "Right," said Mr. J.R., stowing his kris in his belt. "We'll drive over to Brianna's house." "They aren't there," Levi said. "They're in Skatos, I think." All three warriors whirled around to stare at him. "Skatos? How do you know?" said Mr. J.R. Levi wanted to tell them, but Rook had told him not to speak of it to the others yet. "I just... no. They're in a prison. Well, Ivy is anyway." "But didn't we destroy the prison when we destroyed the fortress?" said Evan. "He must have another one," said Levi. The prison he had seen hadn't looked exactly like the one from which they had rescued Rook. "Maybe he built a new fortress," Evan mused. "I remember Ruach telling me that Ponyroast could do that." "We need to go to Hortos," Levi said. "But there's no crest anywhere," said Xavier, looking around. "I'll take you there," said Mr. J.R., "if you're sure." "I'm sure," said Levi. Mr. J.R. sighed. He turned to Xavier and Evan. "Go get your swords," he said. "Make sure you have your seeds, too. And better tell your mom that you'll be late for dinner." Xavier and Evan nodded and dashed into the house. While they waited, Levi and Mr. J.R. went to sit on the edge of the dock so they could rest up and talk through what was happening. So Victor tricked the girls into going to a Hortos, the same way he was trying to trick Evan and Xavier. Why didn't he try to trap Manuel too? Good question, said Mr. J.R. "Why don't you call him and see what happened?" Levi pulled out his phone and called Manuel. "Hey," he said when Manuel answered, "let me ask you something. Did Victor talk to you about going back to a Hortos on your own?" "No," said Manuel, his voice drawn out a bit because he was thinking. "He just wanted my book." "Your book?" "Yes, he said it had mistakes in it and he could fix it. I almost gave it to him, but I decided not to. Then the storm came right after and my book went missing." "Yeah," said Levi, thinking. "That's pretty strange. It's funny, though. What Victor said was almost exactly the same thing my father had told me about his book that was full of errors and a fairy tale. Really. Hold on, Manuel." Levi put the phone down and told his dad what he had said. Mr. J.R. took the phone. "Manuel, this is Mr. J.R. Listen, I want you to keep trying to talk your father about not opening that pod. Do whatever you have to do to convince him. Don't give up, Manuel, okay?" "He's not listening to me, Mr. J.R., but I'll try." "Good man. Where's your dad now?" "He just came home. He's very happy because the agents have found a drill and are getting ready to transport it to the high school site. He's just waiting for it to get there." "Okay, go with him, Manuel. Stay with him. We will come to help as soon as we can." "Okay, sir. Where are you going?" "We need to go and find Brianna and Ivy. We'll be off the grid for a while." "I understand." Mr. J.R. put down the phone. I hope he can do it, Levi said. If those pods open, we're going to have big problems. Levi turned to his dad. How did you know about Ivy being in prison? Levi took a breath, trying to collect his thoughts. Ruach had told him not to tell the other kids. Did that mean he could not tell his dad? He hoped not. Dad, all I know is that Ruach gave me a gift because I chose not to open my locked room. He said I would be able to see things that other people don't normally see. Mr. J.R. gazed at his son, his expression softening. I'd always hoped that I would get another chance to acquire that gift, but to know that you chose well and that Ruach gave it to you, I am very proud of you, son. I'm not so sure this gift is all that great, Levi said. It's making me see things I don't really want to see. Mr. J.R. nodded, putting an arm around Levi. I understand. Sometimes gifts can feel like burdens, but only at first. You'll learn to appreciate it in time. Xavier and Evan came running out of the house with their christen stuck in their belts. We're ready, said Evan, hands on his hips like a superhero. Xavier rolled his eyes. Okay, said Mr. J.R., getting up stiffly. Gather around that tree stump. The boys followed Mr. J.R. to the tree stump. Levi could tell Xavier and Evan were quietly excited about this as he was. They had long wondered how it was they could get to a Horatoss without being called. Victor must have known that and used it as a lure to trap them, just as he had used that fake scroll to make Brianna think he was a real prince warrior. Victor seemed to know way too much about all of them. He knew things they had done and all about their desires and their interests. He even knew about their weaknesses. If Victor knew these things, that meant Ponyroast knew them too. Mr. J.R. took out his kris and held it out with both hands, hilt up. He bent and knelt stiffly on one knee. The boys mimicked his posture, bending to one knee and holding out their small knives. Close your eyes, Mr. J.R. commanded. Bow your heads. They did. Instantly, they felt a heat under their fingers. The crest on the hilt of each kris began to pulse with an inner light. Although the boys could not see what was happening, the crest lifted off the christen and floated toward each other, bonding together into one large crest that hovered above their heads. Open your eyes, said Mr. J.R. softly. The crest, there it was floating above them. Grab on. They reached out for the crest and grabbed hold. They felt a rush, as if the ground underneath them had dropped away and they were falling at the speed of light. The next thing they knew, they were standing on the bank of a large lake in a Horatoss. It looked almost like the pond in the Blakes' backyard, except that the water was reflecting the gold of the sky. And above them, nestled in a huge white cloud, was the shining castle. The castle, said Levi, staring up in amazement. Cool, said Evan. Maybe we'll get some ice cream before we have to go rescue the girls. Easy there, said Mr. J.R. We have to find the water first and get to the cave, remember? Anyone see the water? The boys looked around. The water before them was not the water. There was no crest on it. The lake stretched as far as they could see. Beyond it lay nothing but more clouds and sky. Maybe it's down farther, said Xavier. But we better hurry, said Mr. J.R. Who knows what may be tracking us? They began to trot along the beach, which wound around the large lake until it abruptly ended at a rocky outcropping. The sound of rushing water rose up from below. Xavier climbed up the rocks to have a look and sighed. It was a waterfall. With the crest of a Horatoss floating serenely on the surface of the foaming water below. Why does it have to be a waterfall? Xavier asked no one in particular. He turned to the others. We're jumping into a waterfall. They climbed up and looked for themselves. After you, said Evan. Xavier took a breath, secured his kris in his belt, and leapt off the rock into the water below. Evan did a cannonball. Levi glanced at his dad, who nodded at him and grinned. Levi shrugged, backstepped once, and jumped as far out as he could, bicycling his legs in the air until he hit the water. He heard a splash, but after that there was no sound, a sensation of falling, but not of wetness. It ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Welcome back, warriors, said Ruach. They were all in their warrior clothes and armor. Levi breathed a sigh of relief. They had made it through the waterfall without being killed. He knew they would, but still, that moment of actually doing it, jumping in, was always a bit nerve-wracking. No sweat, Evan said, striking his superhero pose again. So that's all you have to do to get here on your own. Just kneel and hold out the kris and close your eyes. Cool. That is not all, Prince Evan. The posture of the body must match the posture of the heart. The posture of the heart? Evan cocked his head to one side. Humility is always the hardest lesson for a prince warrior to learn, said Ruach. The power of the source only resides in those who are humble of heart. Ruach's hood seemed to be focused on Evan, who quickly dropped his superhero pose and smiled meekly. Rue, the girls are in trouble, Levi said. Does the enemy have them? He has Ivy, but not Brianna. She is still free, for the moment. Levi felt somewhat relieved. That's why I couldn't see her. Where are they? They're in the enemy's fortress. So he rebuilt it? Said Evan. The fortress we destroyed with the Elathron? Yes, he builds new strongholds all the time. Is Victor there too? Xavier asked. Ruach offered only a nod. Levi sensed there was a lot that Ruach was not telling them. So we have to find this new fortress and bust the girls out of prison without getting pulverized by forgers, Evan asked, warming to the idea of another adventure. You must also retrieve the books, said Ruach. The books that contain the swords. I thought Victor just took Manuel's book, said Levi. He also took Brianna and Ivy's, and he has one other as well. Seems like we could use a little more help here, said Xavier, his voice laced with uncertainty. Can't you send for Rook and Finn? You have everything you need, said Ruach. Then he stretched out one long arm, summoning the book. The golden object came in from one of the far tunnels, speeding toward them, then stopping suddenly and floating gently on its pedestal. The pages began to flip, the musical notes they produced dancing in the air. When the pages stopped, letters floated up and rearranged themselves until an instruction appeared. Your enemy is under your feet. That's helpful, said Xavier, shaking his head. Ruach pulled the words from the air and flung them into the orbs on each of their breastplates. They churned around in the glowing orbs a moment before dissolving. Okay, so how are we going to get to the fortress? Last time we had to cross a bridge that wasn't there and all that stuff, said Evan. Follow the sparks to the cave entrance. Your transportation is awaiting you.